Jerome Powell stepped to the podium and the room stopped breathing. Cameras clicked like distant thunder, red lights blinking as if they already knew something the rest of the country didn't. Markets froze mid-sentence, traders stared at screens, anchors leaned forward. In that suspended second, America waited for a man who does not raise his voice to decide the temperature of an entire economy. Powell didn't rush. He didn't smile. He adjusted his papers with the calm of someone who understands that panic is contagious and composure is power. One eyebrow lift, one measured inhale. Social media exploded before he even spoke. Clips looped. Screenshots flew. "Read his face," people typed. "This is bad," others warned. Every pause became prophecy. Breaking news banners crawled across the screen, each one louder than the last. Interest rate decision. Fed chair speaks live. Trump-aligned voices flooded timelines within seconds, accusing, predicting, demanding. Some called him weak, others called him dangerous. A few went further, insisting this moment would expose who the Federal Reserve truly serves. Their certainty traveled faster than facts ever could. This wasn't just another policy update. Rent checks, grocery bills, student loans, and immigrant family savings accounts all hung invisibly in the air. Millions who would never read an FOMC statement still felt the weight of this silence. They knew, instinctively, that one sentence could ripple through kitchens, factories, border towns, and neighborhoods built by people who learned long ago what instability costs. Powell finally leaned toward the microphone, and the room tightened. Futures twitched. Commentators stopped talking mid-word. For a split second, it felt like the country itself was holding its breath, bracing for reassurance or rupture. Because buried beneath the jargon and the charts was a far more dangerous question, one no headline dared ask out loud. As Powell prepared to speak, few realized this wasn't just about interest rates at all. It was about power, pressure, and whether America's economic future is steered by steady hands or by the loudest voices in the room. And as that realization crept in, viewers sensed history bending slightly, realizing this pause would define trust, independence, and whose lives are protected when politics collides with the fragile promise of stability for millions watching from the margins, who rarely get second chances. This meeting mattered more than any spreadsheet could explain. Inflation wasn't an abstract term anymore. It was a feeling people carried into grocery stores, into rent negotiations, into late-night conversations about whether they could afford to stay where they had built their lives. Prices rose faster than wages, and the anxiety settled hardest on working families, immigrants, and first-generation Americans who had already learned how quickly stability can vanish. For them, economic turbulence wasn't theory, it was memory. An election year only sharpened the edge. Every decision now echoed beyond markets and into ballots, narratives, and national identity. The Federal Reserve, once a quiet institution most people ignored, was suddenly dragged into a cultural crossfire. Some demanded speed, relief, and instant comfort. Others warned that rushing would ignite a deeper fire. And in the middle stood Jerome Powell, tasked with choosing patience in a country addicted to immediacy. Hovering just outside the frame was Kevin Warsh, a name spoken with reverence in some circles and suspicion in others. To his supporters, he represented discipline, orthodoxy, and a return to tighter control. To critics, he symbolized an older economic order, less forgiving, less aware of who absorbs the pain when policy hardens. Warsh didn't need to be in the room to be present. His philosophy lingered like an alternative ending, one powerful voices seemed eager to test. And then there was the pressure no one could formally trace. No official statements, no direct commands, just a constant hum of expectation radiating from political power centers that had never hidden their frustration with an independent Fed. The message traveled without fingerprints. Growth now, relief now, loyalty now. Independence, once celebrated as a democratic safeguard, was reframed by critics as arrogance or obstruction. For millions watching, especially those whose families crossed oceans or borders chasing economic dignity, this tension felt painfully familiar. They understood what happens when institutions bend to strongmen, when expertise is mocked, when long-term stability is sacrificed for short-term applause. They had seen currencies collapse, savings evaporate, futures rewritten overnight. That history made this moment feel personal. It reminded them that economic decisions are never neutral, and that silence from power can be as loud as any speech. It also reminded them how quickly hard-earned progress can be reversed when politics overrides principle, leaving ordinary people to absorb the consequences alone. Viewers sensed that this was a crossroads moment where technocratic language masked moral consequence, and where the outcome would quietly signal who is protected during uncertainty and who is expected to endure the longest wait for relief in America today itself. History was quietly watching too. What Powell said next wouldn't just adjust rates, it would signal whether America still believes in guardrails, or whether every institution must kneel before political impatience. It would tell immigrants, workers, and young families whether the system values endurance over spectacle, responsibility over rage. The stakes were no longer measured in basis points, but in trust. Because once independence is surrendered, it is rarely handed back. And as the cameras stayed locked on Powell's face, one truth settled in. This decision would either steady a fragile nation or confirm fears that even the last neutral referee could be pulled into the fight. To understand why this moment felt so explosive, though, you had to understand the man critics say lost control long ago.